watch. She loves to watch.
Hi, I'm Art Fein. You out there? This is Little Art's Poker Party coming to you from Hollywood today. And we're going to specialize on record collecting, and we're going to try and be as obscure as possible so you don't understand anything we're talking about. In today, for the first time on our show, we have Mr. Ken Barnes, editor of Radio and Records and a record collector of note. Welcome, Ken.
Thank you. I'll try to hit a true note.
Okay, and next to him, Mr. Greg Shaw, president of Bomp Records and a longtime record collector. Greg, you might be surprised to know, is into the 60s. Welcome, Greg.
I just discovered the 60s. I'm really getting heavily into it.
Well, you're doing a fine job of it.
Thank you.
On my left, Mr. Michael Ochs, in from Venice, aren't you?
Yes.
Michael Ochs, noted archivist. Show him your book, Michael.
Oh, yes.
Michael has a book out
This is
recently.
my first book, Rock Archives.
We have to pick it up, actually. I don't think there's a
Oh,
camera.
okay. Well, there we go.
And
Funny you should mention it.
Michael's a collector, archivist, consultant, and radio guy now, right?
That's right. I have a show now on KCRW-FM.
In Santa Monica. And speaking of radio guys, on Michael's left, we got Barry Hansen, Dr. Demento.
Good to be here.
Welcome, Barry.
Gee, we're close, but no cigar.
That's right. We usually have cigars on this program, and we don't today. Well, we're going to dispense with the cards. We have too many people and too much to talk about. I want to, on the regular Poker Party show, we sometimes ask questions like, what was your first record you ever bought? Me and Barry already covered that. Let me quickly ask you, this is actually a qualified question. What's the first rock record? Because, like, I bought Lisbon Antigua by Nelson Riddle was my first
record period, actually, was at the very advanced age of 16,
Jesus.
which is the first time I realized that you could actually buy the records that you heard on the radio.
Wow, how did you find that out?
By getting a driver's license and finding out there were record stores that stocked them.
What store was this in? Was this in America?
Yeah, this was in Arcadia, California.
Uh-huh.
And the record was, although I'm a 45 collector mostly now, it was an album, I have to admit. The Byrds, Mr. Tambourine Man.
Huh. That is late.
Real late.
A lot of rock had already passed by then, Ken. Have
Yes,
you backed up now and caught up a
Not
little
as
bit?
much as I should have. It's kind of restricted my collection, actually, because I didn't really start listening to the radio until 1960 either, so all
wait.
of the 50s is a lost period.
So your first record was an album, which actually, I mean, you must have had a fairly progressive family to have had a player to play albums. I mean, if nobody listened to records, you might have just had a 78 player around the house, for example.
It was one of those, real thick, corrugated kind of needles.
1960 was the very year they stopped making 78s.
Oh, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. It was designed for, I think, beating up singles, trashing them pretty much. It did wonders for the album.
Well, actually, speaking of trashing singles, Barry, you had or did you ever have a Highway Hi-Fi, one of those Chrysler products?
I never owned one. I have some of the records for them.
I had a friend who had one of those. Those were neat.
Well, my friend Keith Joe Dick bought a 5060 Soto that came stock
Oh,
with a
really?
chrome-plated Highway Hi-Fi. It was a nice surprise. But didn't they? I mean, like, tone arms are measured in what ounces or what
Grams.
Grams, very
Grams,
light things, and those things were metered by 2 or 3 pounds pressure, weren't they?
Yeah, Sirius made one that played 45s, and that has destroyed many 45s. In its
It
time.
actually stripped the grooves right out. didn't
The
it?
Highway Hi-Fi, of course, only played records made specifically for the Highway Hi-Fi.
Oh, I
little
didn't-
7-inch, 16 RPM records.
7
So
inches.
the selection was kind of limited.
Wait, standard 45 RPM
Yeah.
size, but
But they were 16
16.
RPM. Many of you may have seen old record players like from the early 60s and noticed that they had 4 speeds, 78,
Yeah.
45, 33, and 16. At one time, there was considerable agitation for 16 to take over the role now filled by 33. But nobody really needed to hear an hour of music without turning the record over. Americans aren't quite that lazy. So 16 never quite caught on except for talking books, a role now filled by cassettes.
all right.
So that's why they don't put 16 on record players anymore.
But of course, the purpose it fulfilled was when you have a 33 RPM record, you could slow it down then, which we
Yes.
still want to do.
Right.
Right.
That's
Yeah,
how I
the
discovered how
Kingsman
neat
album,
the
for
Trashman's
instance.
record of Surfing Bird sounded when played very slowly, the middle part, the wordless part.
And how does it sound? Is there some kind of backward masking?
It kind of sounds like the surfing bird meets the creature from the Black Lagoon. I play it that way on my show once in a while.
Oh, you play different speed records on the
Yes,
show?
once
Good
in a
idea.
while,
I
yeah.
like that. Yeah.
And backwards, too.
Rodney does that too.
That's perverse.
Mr. Ed backwards.
Sometimes he intends to.
I don't think he ever intends to.
I gotta say about, oh, and that trivia story I just picked up kind of belatedly was that Buddy Holly's version of Slippin' and Slidin', which is very slow, which actually I remember I have it covered by Mike Berry on one of those Buddy Holly tributes. The reason it was recorded slow is he liked the Chipmunks. He recorded it at 7.5 IPS so that he could give it to his friends as a 15 IPS Chipmunk record. Because you play it at the proper speed, it sounds like a proper rock and roll record.
What a great story.
Something we never knew before.
Yes.
Greg, what was the first record you ever bought?
I've been trying to remember. There was a time around 1955 when I found out there were record stores, and I bought a whole bunch, and I kept buying whole bunches, but I think it might have been Fats Domino, maybe Blueberry Hill.
Huh. Bunches of us. I mean, it's surprising that you wouldn't remember that kind of fact, because if you know any record collectors, you'll know that most record collectors remember where every record they got came from. I mean, oh yeah, thrift store in Arroyo Grande, I remember that, yeah, and oh, Marcia Wynn, I remember her. I got some more of her records in here. Michael, what was the first record you ever bought?
The first one actually was Honky Tonk by Bill Doggett. I remember because it was like a big investment, 69 cents. And
78?
45. And I bought it because there were no lyrics that I could get tired of. It was an
There was
instrumental.
some reasoning in this?
Oh yeah, because I had all my sister's records in the house, all the Frankie
Oh,
Lanes
oh.
and Joe Staffords already.
So you had older people around the house. so,
Right,
yeah.
yeah. That was the first one I actually went out and bought.
Well, wait a second. Were they buying rock and roll? I mean, this is a very divisional.
Yeah, Elvis was in the house.
Yeah.
And that's the only one I remember was Elvis, actually.
It stayed in the spare bedroom.
Yes, and so did I.
And actually, Barry, the first. Did you decide which one it was now? Which one the first rock and roll record was? You
Well, the
bought?
first real certifiable rock and roll record was Crazy Man Crazy by Bill Haley, 53, which I just kind of picked up along with the other pop stuff that was out at that time. It was maybe a year later before I realized, I mean, I knew it was loud and had a fast beat and that I liked it. It was a year later before I realized, hey, this is a movement. This is rock and roll. It is different from Joe Stafford and Perry Como and Buddy Morrow and people like that.
Although Perry Como's version of Glendoro,
Yeah.
later covered
Oh,
by
yeah.
the
Fun classic.
Downliners. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, put him down.
Boy, you guys are losing me on this one. You know, those of us who are into this record collecting thing, we often see, for example, this magazine. You may never have seen it, Goldmine. It's the Bible of the record collectors. You have to have a magnifying glass to read a lot of the
It's more like
ads.
the Koran of
they-
record.
it's like a
the Bible, I
it's like a
swear.
small company phone book.
The
Oh, it's
Dead
often
Sea Scrolls.
often very inaccurate, but sort of interesting for the auction lists that are just impossible to read. They smash as
I
much
like
as
the
they-
photos myself.
Yeah, you would. But one of the things that, to show you what the problems of actually becoming a record collector, if you're thinking about becoming one. Now, these gentlemen here all function in society. I include myself in that category. But in fact, a lot of people can't. I mean, record collecting is a good thing if you're very solitary and you want to sit in a closet all day and just look at your records, because it's a give and take thing. You can look at the grooves and enjoy yellow Atlantic records more than red Atlantic records because you know they're more valuable. And it's a lot of people who collect can't actually talk and function in society, but we can because we're exceptional people. Now, this article in Goldmine has sort of struck me as another example of, this is called Plenty of Extraordinary Finds in Others' Trash. And it's a bunch of submissions from people about the best records they found in garbage cans. And I didn't send in my edition because I never did anything like that. But because we didn't really actually go looking in garbage cans per se, but if you pass a garbage can and there's a bunch of records sticking out of it, I mean, you kind of got to go look unless there's like a moose head on it or something you really don't want to go through.
Things with maggots.
I found a few of the biggest hits of the Dr. Demento radio show in radio stations' trash cans.
Boy, radio station trash cans, they are really something. You're right. I've gotten some fine records myself. Passed on from other people who were in trash cans, of course. Actually, now, not trash cans, but now we're all really hardcore record collectors. I mean, the layman will ask the question like, how many records do you have? And for example, my vast collection of about 5,000 albums is like a drop in a puddle to these guys. I imagine this bunch represents about, at least 250,000 records, probably 500,000 among us. And mine is pretty slim. I'm probably about 3 on a 10 scale with my little respectable
But it's the
collection.
quality that counts.
Yes.
Right.
Right. So as a hunter, as a guy that looks for records like you do, Ken, I mean, people like us are never bored on vacation because you go to Baltimore, you don't know anything about Baltimore, but you head to the thrift stores and you look for records. I mean, that's the good thing. There's always a friendly thrift store around somewhere. Now, what would you say was the best score you ever got? I mean, I know mine, but maybe you don't know yours. I mean,
It has been so long since I've really had a chance to go out and find stuff like that, I think the memory is buried. You ask the wrong guy on that one.
The old corpuscles are dying, huh? What?
Yeah, because it's it's been they're really, even when I moved down to LA, it wasn't really prime territory anymore. And I had some luck in San Jose when I started record collecting, but
I don't believe you can
nothing
go out and find
phenomenal.
treasures anymore.
Well, now it's
In the
real
thrift stores,
tough,
you're lucky to
yeah.
find something from the early 70s.
There's so much competition now.
Yeah.
Everybody's
lots of
lined up
people
at the door when the
scouring.
thrift store opens so
Yeah.
they can get records
Yeah,
to
Chris
sell, and they're
Keefe is
adding
right
gold
there.
mines.
There's no problem.
I remember this one I went to about 5 years ago, and it was a garage sale. And there was one garage which was all junk closed, and there was another garage that was closed. And I said, do you have any records? And the guy said, yeah, the other garage is full of records. I said, can I look through? He said, well, yeah, but they're not going to be cheap. I said, okay, fine. So he opens the garage, it's like my house. It's like everything in 12 by 12 outer sleeves to protect the records, all the Ritchie Valens. I mean, everything I ever wanted was there. And there was also a whole bunch of 45s. And I said, so I pulled out like about maybe about 200 albums and about 100 singles. And he says, don't forget, this is not going to be cheap, and they're all perfect shape. He says, I said, how much? He said, 50 cents each. I said, well, only if you throw in the singles. He said, okay, it's a deal. Whoa.
That's the kind of story we were looking
Yeah.
for, Michael.
Yeah.
You've gone all over the world in this stuff, but you got any particular ones that stand out as good finds?
Oh, let's see, I guess 10,000 records that belong to a major local radio station. You hear them on my show every week to this day. Mostly mint copies of the pop things of the 50s, but lots of the comedy things, your Spike Jones and Yogi Jorgensen and that kind of thing. So maybe that was my best single find.
When was it? How did it come about? I mean,
Through business channels, people who knew me and knew that I might be interested. I mean, it wasn't just driving down a back street in Redondo Beach or something like that.
Yeah, I keep
So
wanting
it's kind
to put an ad in R&R, just saying any radio station that is tired of its library, might want to think about donating it to me.
My favorite,
Why not?
My favorite garage sale story actually was right across my house in Venice, right across the street. There were these Hells Angels type bikers having a garage sale. I went, well, you got to check it out. So I walk across the street and I said, you guys got any records? He says, what, you a cop? Dead serious.
you didn't say you got a record.
You guys get records? Well, you're a cop.
I got to tell mine quick, and that was because mine. I mean, I should have quit in 1972 because that was the height. It's all been downhill
Is that
since
when you
there.
found all those hullabaloo singles?
No, it wasn't Hullabaloo. Oh, that was 73
That's
actually.
great.
Well, there's two of them, isn't there? The first one was.
You got rich off and retired off those.
Yeah.
didn't you?
The first big score I made was 1972, going to a furniture store on Santa Monica Boulevard near Western, and I said, "You got any records?" And he just says, "Oh, that box by the door. You can have it for $2." And I said, "Well, I still don't know if I want it." And it was all new promo singles, and I said, "Nah." And as I got back down into the unsleeved ones is where I found my two Presley sons. And I said, "Thank you." And I walked out shaking and then drove home screaming like, I'd finally made it, which is, to some of us, the epitome of record collecting is getting Elvis Presley on Sun Records from early 55. And that was that. And then a year later, I remember I was at a thrift store in the Valley, and they said, "Well, we're closing at 4." And I said, "Good." I said, "We're closing forever at 4. I mean, we're going out of business." And I said, "Okay, well, where do you have your records?" And he says, "Over on that table." I said, "Well, let me buy all of them." And he said, "Well, you're going out of business. I mean, what are you going to do with them?" So I bought the whole table. I said, "Every record in the place, I'll give you $5." He says, "Okay." So that's when I picked up the cloth, and there was another 4,000 records under it. So I put them all in the car. At the time, I had a '69 Dodge, real big, and then drove home, and I think I called Greg and one other guy, and it started raining too. It was nice. We had the trunk open, looking through. But that was when I got 1,100 copies of Leader of the Laundromat. You remember
Right.
that, don't you, by the detergents with the picture sleeve.
Oh, yes.
Still got a few of those around.
Criminally
there.
depressed the value of that record.
Right.
I remember the
and
great days
all
when Greg used to go down to New Orleans, and he came back and he stopped at my house before he went home. Fool that he'd be. And I got one each of everything he had found. Remember
That trip is actually the highlight of my collecting life.
That's
It
right.
was around 70 or 71.
Well,
and
must have been good in those
Even better
days.
than New Orleans was on the way back, I stopped in El Paso at this place called the Krupp Warehouse. It was an old distributor that had kept a box full of promo copies on every record that had come in since the war. and this warehouse was just vast. And only one or two collectors had been there. They were blues collectors, and they, I guess, cleaned out a lot of 78s. But I was walking over piles of records that were breaking underfoot. They were like $100 records, Charlie Feathers on Meteor, things like that. They had everything. I didn't know where to start. I didn't even buy any 60s stuff. They had all of the great 60s stuff there for $0.25, but they had all the 50s stuff for $0.25 too. So I filled in complete first few years of Atlantic and Sun and all of those labels, and a lot of oddball rockabilly stuff. Unfortunately, I was with a guy who missed his girlfriend, and he was dying to get back home. We had rented this huge truck and taken out a bank loan specifically to buy records. One afternoon in this place, we'd barely dented, and he said, we got to go, man, we got to go. And never got back there.
Well, at least you got it.
Yeah.
That's good.